Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending Dominique's final fellowship presentation.
After working on her initiative for the last 8 months, Dominique is joining us today to speak of our work with the Waban-Aki community. This presentation will consist of roughly a 20-minute summary of Dominique's initiative, followed by a 25-minute Q&A. Please note that this presentation is being recorded.
Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that Dominique is currently presenting from. She's joining us today from the settler territory of Lévis, Quebec, the unceded territory of Waban-Aki. However, for the last 8 months, Dom worked from within the community of Odanak Indian Reserve number 12.
Before we get started, a quick introduction is in order. After completing her bachelor's degree in art history at Concordia University, Dominique graduated from McGill University with a master's degree in information science. Over the course of her studies, Dominique showed an avid interest and a blind love for archive studies and museology until she read the articles Issues in Native American Archives by Amy Cooper and a documentary approach to Aboriginal archives by Mary Ann Pilipchuk. From these articles, Dominique learned and could no longer deny the colonist roots of her practice and the destructive impact it has had on First Nations, Inuit, and Métis narratives.
Since 2018, Dominique has been working as a facilitator with the Waban-Aki people of Odanak in creating an archival center where the mission answers exclusively to the needs and wants of the community. The community has welcomed Dominique to share her expertise while showing her the importance for First Nations to govern their own collective memories. Since September, Dominique has had the chance to speak of her experience in information science courses at the Université de Montréal and McGill. She's been asked to join the Association of Canadian Archivists and chair the Indigenous Matters Working Group to collaboratively develop practical guides for communities who wish to inaugurate their own community archives.
I've had the pleasure of forming a strong friendship with Dominique throughout the course of the fellowship. She is incredibly smart, supportive, and knowledgeable. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with her on the phone regarding our project initiatives and at almost all of our weekly triad group meetings along with Emily and Courtney. Dominique is like a big sister, the big sister I never had. She is someone you can really talk to. She often likes to tell people that she is blunt, but she truly has a heart of gold. And it is clear from the important work she conducts with archiving that she is extremely aware and supportive to the broad community. Dominique is incredible. She's an ally to the broad Indigenous community. She cares and will go out of her way to make a difference.
Just a quick reminder before we get started that throughout Dom's presentation, we encourage you to make comments and ask questions in the chat box or comment section of either Zoom or the Facebook live stream. I will be watching these feeds with Joel and collating comments and questions, and will moderate a Q&A period following the presentation. If you're joining us on Zoom, please consider turning off your microphone and cameras to limit background noise and to help with connectivity. Should you have any technology concerns, please feel free to let us know via the chat box. Without further ado, I'd like to pass the virtual microphone over to today's presenter, Dominique.
Thank you, Joel and Courtney. As already mentioned, my name is Dominique Robichaud. I'm originally from Moncton, New Brunswick. Have been living in Quebec for 12 years now, but for the last 8 months, I had the opportunity to work with the Odanak, one of the 2 communities part of the Waban-Aki Nation, for about 8 months. For those who might not know where is Odanak, Waban-Aki is located between Quebec City and Montreal, so really between both on the south shore of the St. Lawrence River. I personally first drove into the community to interview community members to help write a paper that was titled, information seeking behaviors for graduate students in academic libraries. And for my master's degree. And then in the course of that meeting, I asked members of the Grand Council how they managed their archives. Note by then I had already an archival studies degree, so it's the sort of question that I asked often. And so when I asked this question, the answer came back to as, well, actually we don't manage our archive. It's something that we would really like for it to be dealt with. The council and the community alike have a lot of content that they would like to share with one another, but they don't really know how to do so. And we've been trying to convince an archivist to come and move in with us, move in the community for years now, but nobody really wants to move this far away. out of a big city. And so when I walked away from that interview, I thought, well, maybe I could do something. I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be me. So I reached out and we had this conversation with 2 directors of the Ground Council for a little bit. And then I was happy to be able, with one of my Professor Daikiev, was able to have a My Tax grant. I also had a McGill bursary, and for the last 8 months, I was supported financially by the Pathy Foundation Fellowship. And so in total, I would say I've been working in and out of that community for 3 years as a consultant. So that was more the role that I assumed. I was helping the community build the foundational block of an archive center. Now note that this has been a 3-year project. I do this normally part-time. Members of the community join voluntarily. So there's no building that's called archive center on it yet. Nonetheless, we have everything that we believe that now everything is set up so that we can make big grant proposals, ask for grants so we could actually build physically a community archive center. Before I go any further, I always like to give a brief history of what it is archives Indigenous communities. It is not an exception. Odanak is like many other communities who have this sort of history or relationship with archives. So first off, I think I know everybody already knows this, but First People of Canada or Indigenous people have a history that extends long behind in the past, and they have a very rich and diverse culture that is internationally recognized as a fundamental part of Canada's own heritage and cultural identity, and has subsequently become a very prevalent contemporary subject of interest. And foreseeably, numerous Canadians, they go to historical archives to acquire raw material to do their research in many different fields. However, what is very important to note is that most of the content that you will find in these archival centers are not rendered by First Nations themselves or Métis or Inuit people. They're mostly rendered by outsiders or ministries. So we're talking scholars, explorers, missionaries, First Nations ministry, etc. So note that the archives, they do exist when you search First Nations or Métis or Inuit, but the chances of you actually finding something that was rendered by First Nations in these archival centers are very rare. I'll give you an example. I initially worked a lot with an archivist working at the LAC, so the Library and Archives of Canada, and they've admitted that they get the second most searched name in their database is Indigenous, after I think it was Defense. There's still only, at the time, was only 2 employees that work for First Nations or Indigenous Archive Center, and they acknowledged that people who wanted the content, they didn't know necessarily what they were going to do with it, but they also knew that their content reflected the interest and perspective of the creators that helped often solidify and preconceive the romantic notion of the other. So not necessarily, you see the Indigenous communities through the eyes of the people who look at them from outside rather from inside out. Another thing that comes as no surprise to me, following all the readings that I had done, and when I came to Odanak, it was obvious that it was the same thing. Most stories, events, achievement, etc., which we normally as European descent would archive, they would be passed on by means of oral tradition, objects. We know the wampum belt, for example. So there was not necessarily a need for archiving in the past. However, in the recent decades, the state has made kind of record management as an essential tool for legitimacy. So if you think simply of land claim initiatives, oral agreements were not perceived as illegitimate as much as signed contracts. What we call reserve agents which represented the government inside each reservation. They would document everything, and this was considered the real history or the real documentation of what was happening inside the community. And so as we go through history and with land claim initiatives, especially, you see that communities realize we have to document what is happening inside our communities. We need to document to share to people outside the community, but also inside the community. So It should come as no surprise that the Odanak, or the Waban-Aki Nation, decided, well, we want to be able to organize all this content and all this knowledge that we've documented over the years. Before I go any further, I just want to give you an example here. So this is a picture that I didn't take this picture, but this is a picture that was shared on the Facebook page. So this is a content, it's a way for them to share knowledge. People is the Odanak page of all the community members, and they had a powwow in 2018, which I had the opportunity to participate. They took pictures, they shared it online, everybody was commenting, etc. It was a very rich piece of culture for the nation. However, what is easily accessible is if you go to the McGill Museum in Montreal and you would search Waban-Aki, for example, this kind of picture would show up in your research, which is called White Man Dressed as an Indian, right? So you do not necessarily have a accurate portrayal of what it is to be a Waban-Aki, because the things that might be more of interest or accurate are not necessarily easy accessible. Excuse me, I'm a little bit rusty today. So one of the way that you could argue that it's an interest for the Waban-Aki people is that here we have, this is where I worked. This is actually here on the bottom here. That was my office. I had this much sun come in every day. So this is the Museum of the Abenaki. It was founded in 1965. It is the first First Nations museum of the province of Quebec. And it was inaugurated by members of the community. The moment that this museum was created, which was meant to be presenting or exhibiting artifacts, they started receiving out of nowhere, they weren't expecting this, a lot of archives from community members. So as people passed on, there were pictures, there were letters, love letters, band council meetings, etc. As people passed on, the next generation didn't know what necessarily they wanted to or should do with them. And so simply would show up from the front door, through the front door here, and donate a big box of content. Unfortunately, we did not have the resources to deal with this during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and almost up to today. So all of these boxes ended up in the basement. Nobody really knew what was the content inside these boxes. That's the reason why when they received requests from researchers to access raw material, they knew they had the content, but they didn't know how to share it with them because they did not know the content nor the means to share it with them also. So unfortunately, they had to refuse or say, sorry, we can't help you. And these people would then go to places like the LAC or the McGill Museum. Also, the museum started hearing interest from the community members to access themselves the content from their ancestors. So they knew that, oh, my great grandma donated a box of content at some point. I would like to access it to show it to the next generation. But again, was not necessarily, didn't even know the scope of the content that existed in the basement. Nonetheless, let's not forget that they keep receiving boxes almost monthly, or content, maybe not an entire box, but a folder worth of stuff every week or every month. And also, another thing is they were constantly approached by the Grand Council seeking permits to preserve material that they themselves produce as their organization, because they knew that if somebody came in, like a researcher, come in the community and wanted to know what the activities were happening inside the community, they would like their content to be shared, because they are a very active First Nation. The Grand Council does a lot of projects for the environment, for the economy, et cetera, and they want that content to be cited by the work of researchers. And so the Waban-Aki Nation, like many Indigenous communities, developed the desire to safeguard and recount its collective memories throughout their means of archiving. A community archive became an interesting alternative for communities who need and want to salvage their narrative for future generations, and to create a space where stories and knowledge can be stored, shared, subsequently define one's perceived understanding of what it is to be a Waban-Aki. And so since September, I've been working with the community to define their objectives, the main operations the center will partake in, the audience, define the audience, try to find out what software is best to answer their needs, and really being present simply to document their needs so that they and themselves could answer them properly. Now note that I really took the role as a facilitator seriously. I did not want to be the one saying this is what you should be doing. So I was mostly there asking questions, proposing solutions, proposing multiple solutions, and seeing which solution best suited them according to their answers. So I just wanted to show you that, sorry, I have a hard time breathing. When you're 7 months pregnant, it can be difficult. So the mission here was to promote the collective memories of the Waban-Aki Nation and preserve community knowledge in order to facilitate its transmission to future generation and researchers. So it was a little bit twofold. It was preserve and then share. Ideally, there would be a third element that will come up, which will be help teach other communities. Or what is beautiful with Odanak, it is 500 meters away from Kuna College. That is a First Nations-led First Nations college. And we've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of these students in the last 2 years, and they would love to be technician archivists, many of them. So we would like also to use this platform or this space for them to learn the techniques and maybe adopt them and adapt them to their communities also. The objective is to promote and make known the collective memory of the nation, accompany members of the nation in preserving the various histories and archives produced or acquired by the nation, share insight and procedures to other First Nation members with an interest in creating a community archive themselves. The 4 main operations that we've identified is acquire content. So make it, find a way that when we acquire the content, it is immediately taken care of. Maybe not from A to Z, but at least we know the content, we know the scope, we can document it, we organize and categorize them, rooted in Waban-Aki values and languages. So this was the part that was very difficult for me, and it is not completely done. It is probably, I have a guide, an archival guide, and that's the part where I have many questions left, but I do have a committee that will help me define this. And share and promote, so authentic, to help portray the, share and promote the authentic portrayal of the community. So this, we're talking online database, website, Facebook, and Instagram page. These do not exist yet because we're in the process of creating a logo, defining our colors, and we've just recently had funding for a hosting. So we'll be able to host all these elements on them and make them public. So they exist, but only on a few computers of ours. And finally, the element of preservation is very important so that we can continue doing these 4 operations. I'll give you an example. One of the community famous person is Alanis Obomzawen. So she's a famous documentary producer, director here in Canada. And she, for example, has a great collection of archives. This person will most likely donate her entire archives to the LAC, which is normal because it will be organized, categorized immediately, shared, promoted, preserved with state of the art. We kind of wish that we could also be attractive to her as an archive center. And so to do that, we really need to get all of our operations working and tested out beforehand so that maybe she would feel confident in donating her archives. Now, this is not a call for her to donate her archive, but this is just an example. We have a lot of, there's been a lot of chiefs who has their collection of archives still in their house. We would very much like to be able to share and promote them to the rest of the community or outside of the community. But to do that, we need to be much more attractive and look like we really will take care of the content that we are given. Now, before, at the beginning of our project, we were asked by the fellowship to create an adapted timeline, a timeline. And now I'm presenting you that adapted timeline because, of course, I had put maybe too much food on my plate. Also, I've had a few bumps. We've had, I would say, some moments we had complete stops. The way I had explained it to my colleagues in the museum is that initially I was thinking this was going to be a highway. I was going to do takeoff and landing A and B. However, we ended up taking mostly back roads. We've had to stop along the way, change a few tires. But the benefit of it is by having to go through so many ups and downs together, we ended up developing closer bonds. So we're not as far as we wanted to be, but I think we have a better foundation to be able to go further for this project. And so when I first started, the first half of my fellowship was really identify, centralize, digitize content, identify grant that would maybe want to help us fund this project. We established a mission, we designed a database and research tools, then we develop application policies and procedures. So if ever we hired people, they would know immediately how to do things starting on day one. Because we are near the Trois-Rivières College, we were able to welcome 2 interns, including one that was from the community. So she is a Waban-Aki member of the nation. She lives in the other reservation, that's Waban-Aki. And they both helped me do all the operations and test all the practices and operations that we had documented, see if they actually work and if they're doable in a certain amount of time. The intern that I had from the community was an aspiring librarian. And I was like, oh, it's okay, but you're gonna really enjoy your internship as an archivist. And the beauty of it is at the end, this 19-year-old girl had 6 weeks, we had 6 weeks to change her mind. And she changed her mind. We didn't lie to her, she just realized that archiving was really fun. So we are happy to announce that yesterday we were able to sign her a full-time contract with us. And so this project, even if I am leaving because of the fellowship or because I will be giving birth in August, she will be able to continue the work. She's been trained with us for 2-3 months. And now she will have a full-time summer job, and starting in January of the next year, she will have a full-time job with the museum to continue the work. So this opportunity, this fellowship gave fruit to a full-time job, to a member of the community. I hear something? Where? And then the future will look like this. So now that we've identified the grants, we are going to be writing grants the next couple of months because their due date are in in June and September. We're in the process of making sure that she has a full-time job, the intern, for January 2023. A database migration is happening, outreach program also, and an educational program will be in the long run. So these are all the things that once we feel that are completed, we would be able to ask for the funding or the grant for building a physical place, and then migrate all of the content inside of it. Now, I mentioned that we had hit a few bumps in the road, but there were mostly unexpected successes that also arose from this wonderful project. I have a few here. So a few weeks into the project, here is a picture of the AAQ meeting. So the AAQ is the Association of Archivists of Quebec. They've reached out to all archivists asking, any of you are interested in indigenous archives? Because we feel like we should have like a group of sharing knowledge. If anybody wants to be part of this group or has been a part of on-site real life experiences that they want to share. And so I connected, and I was blown away by the amount of archivists in Quebec who were really interested in Indigenous archives. And in addition to that, they had reached out to community members. So not necessarily archivists, but community members. And we had a lot of office workers working for the council that around Quebec were really interested in it. They connected to this meeting and said, like, we're not going to lie, we're not archivists, but we feel like we could learn from this group. And so from this larger group, there was created a smaller group that's only created from First Nation Indigenous members who are interested in archives, who are not necessarily archivists, and they are creating this knowledge group where they're sharing their experiences, sharing their issues, and really writing down what they need from us to help them out. So I think it's a wonderful initiative that was done by the AAQ, and I'm happy to be part of this group. Here, actually, before I go there, I'm going to talk about this one here. So this here is a box. Inside this box, there's a USB key. So 1 month into this project, there's an Ivy League school in New Hampshire called Dartmouth College that I had no idea existed before this project, but a lot of people were like, yeah, Dom, everybody know what Dartmouth College is. And so they reached out after hearing that we were building a community center in Odanak. They wanted to send us digitized copies of all the photographs that had been taken in Odanak in the 60s and 70s by one of their deceased anthropologists who had donated his archives to the college. So we've received in that box a USB key of 1,400 photographs that had never been seen by members of the community. They generously continued helping us. So then we asked, which database would you propose for these photographs? Which database would you propose for promoting and sharing archives online? They ended up training us, paying for our hosting, and we continue asking about repatriations, and they agreed to talk with us about repatriating photographs, audios, journals that were taken by their anthropologists, and basket weavings that had been taken or given by community members to these professors who are now deceased. But all this content related to Odanak. And the lesson for us from this experience was, let's just ask and not care if we get rejected. We felt like we were asking a lot, but we continuously got positive feedback. And it was a very beautiful example for us of what being an ally was, and repatriation. People who really care about repatriation. So we're in the process of that. We realized, okay, archives, now we need to speak with lawyers, we need to talk about copyright specialists, et cetera, et cetera. So this project slowed us down, but it's going to be a beautiful outcome. This comes to another picture that I have right here. This is, we did a naming project. So what we did is we invited all members of the community to help us identify who were on these photographs. These photographs had never been seen. So it was we expected maybe 5-10 people, and we ended up having 25 members of the community. And we had the pleasure of seeing the elders of the community identifying themselves as young people in these photos. So these pictures were about 60 to 65 years old. And it was so fun also to be able to see the resemblance between a baby and a 7-year-old man in the room. There was also beautiful moments when we saw people seeing their grandparents for the first time on photographs. This event was supposed to last an hour. We had food for them, et cetera, et cetera. And we ended up continuing for, I think, a total of 2.5 hours. And they were very sad so when we turned off the PowerPoint. So we could have continued, really. It was very enjoyable. This is just an example of, this is the wonderful intern that we had. This is the basement where we have a lot of archives. You see she's at work, she's categorizing, she's creating a database with an inventory so people can understand what will exist. From that work, we're able to directly answer to some researchers who called us and said, I'm writing a book, I'm doing this paper, I need to have access to this content. We were able to do a search, find content, and send a copy to them. Here is a friend of mine. He's a very good archivist working on preservation. And he came from Montreal, and he helped us really gave some hands-on good example of how preservation and conservation was important. So he really did a, how would I say, hands-on but very adapted training, and the outcome of that was so wonderful because the people from the community said it was so wonderful that we didn't see a generic training. We see something that was very adapted to us, and it wasn't a training saying this is what you're doing wrong. It was, he didn't even know, but he was really using the ABC approach, so the asset-based community-driven approach. So he looked at what we had and how we could maximize what we had to help preserve and conserve the content. I just want to show some of the pictures that we received from Dartmouth College that were really wonderful for us. Showing pictures that you don't necessarily see the face and you can't identify the people because we're in talks with lawyers, etc. So what can we show? What can we not show? And we're talking with Dartmouth lawyers also. So we can be the one who own, the community could be the one owning the content rather than Dartmouth College. And so, so they were quite wonderful. These are younger people celebrating the powwow in community. Before I go any, I'm about to end. People ask in preparation and rehearsal, give us a little bit of your personal experience working with the Waban-Aki. And so I have a few personal successes that I do want to share. And it's in big part because of the fellowship and the money that came in and helped me help me live during these 8 months and working with the community. One of the my personal success is I was invited to join the Indigenous Matters Work Group, a subcommittee created by the Association of Canadian Archivists in Ottawa. I was asked to join them because of the AAQ gave my name. The objective will be to create guides for Indigenous communities who wish to create their own community archives. So I'll be able to pull out the experience that I've had with the Odanak and create a more generic guide, how-to guide, so that other communities could do the same. Note that I was a little bit wary because I am not a member of a community, First Nations community. I'm not Métis nor Inuit, and I did not want to speak on behalf of, but I've had a lot of support from the community I work with. They felt like I would be a good person to represent them. And so I've agreed because of that. I also reached out to the AAQ and said, you know, that small group of Indigenous people that you've created, would it possible that I have access to what is the needs that are documented in this group? And this group actually came back to me and said, we would like you to come and join us every now and then. So I'll be translating the needs. There's a language barrier here because members of the AAQ, part of the Indigenous people in this small AAQ group are French speakers only, and the AACA in Ottawa, they only speak in English. So I will be translating. So I feel like my role as facilitator continues in that regard. Another thing that I wanted to share with my fellows here is that when we all met last summer, I kept saying often, I understand the importance of building relationships in communities. But to be quite honest, I'm going in as a consultant, and I felt a little bit uncomfortable with trying to build these friendly relationships with members of the community, knowing that I would leave in 8 months. I felt like having worked with them a little bit in the past for the last 3 years, they encounter a lot of researchers who come and go. They come for self-serving reasons. They are nice, but they're doing it for PhDs. They're doing it for research paper. The pay is maybe good because it's in a community, an Indigenous community. So I felt like I didn't want to build that relationship and then leave after 8 months. I felt like it was a sort of a betrayal. And so I was very clear in front of all the other fellows that I was going in there as a consultant, paid as a consultant, and leaving as a consultant. Of course, that did not happen. I ended up tremendous bond with the members of the museum, especially, and they're all community members. After being there for 3 months, I spent Christmas at home here, and it stopped me from sleeping a little bit because I was realizing that I was building very deep, meaningful relationship with these people, and that because of that, I would never really be able to leave. And that I was going to probably be part of their lives, and they're going to be part of mine for a long time, something that I wasn't expecting. And one of my personal successes is 2 months ago, I was in the museum, and I know all the members who work there. They're all community members, and I've come to know their children, who are about my age, a little bit younger than me. And the women that I work with were saying how in their childhood there was this woman who came often to in the reservation. She was a professor from New Hampshire, and she came often. And when she came, she had so many gifts and toys and cake, etc. And everybody called her auntie, and that they very much loved her for that. And she still comes. She still comes once every 4-6 months. She's a professor, and she talks about the Indigenous communities in Canada in her work. And so she was a professor, and then slowly became a researcher, and slowly became very connected with the community. And I said, oh, how I wish that I had an auntie like that in my life, that a non-related auntie that just spoils me for the sake of spoiling me. And two of the children of these women who were also sitting with us at the table said, "But Dom, you know that you're that auntie to us, right?" And then I took a step back, and then they were like, "Well, you give us gifts. You bake a cake for everybody who's had their birthday here, etc." And then I realized that it's kind of my fault that I had built such strong relationship with them. But I'm very thankful for it today. And so, although that I was initially a consultant, I leave the community as an auntie, and hence will be continuing to play the role of the auntie and the consultant, hopefully for a few years to come, part-time, of course. So I want to thank you. And if there's any questions, I invite you to post them in the chat here, or if you're following us directly on Facebook, you can also do that there.
Wow, thank you so much, Dominic. That was a wonderful presentation. Yeah, and the work you're doing is really amazing and really needed. And I especially enjoyed how you highlighted throughout in your presentation kind of the importance of understanding how Indigenous cultures approach telling stories and traditional knowledge from an oral perspective, as opposed to how the colonial approach is more from a lens of talking about documentation and writing things down and ownership. So I think it's really important to understand that. And I guess I'll start off with a question with that. How did you approach that when you're kind of combining or collecting the documentation and archiving things from the past and using your knowledge in archiving now, as opposed to what you've learned about traditional knowledge keeping and documentation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm faced with a lot more questions than answers. I'm not saying that what I've learned in school was useless, not one bit. I think class helped me ask good questions. However, one of the things that I had the chance to talk with Joel, with you, was, like I mentioned, a lot of the content is storytelling. And so, for example, when I was sharing the pictures, when the pictures were shared on the screen and people were naming people, we were writing down the names. Yeah, so this is, okay, we have 4 men here. Who are these men? And then we wrote them down. But we didn't skip to the next picture right away, because then stories would start. Oh yeah, these two, that's funny that they're together on that picture because they don't like each other. Or, oh, remember, it's so sad that he's not here today. He passed on 2 months ago. And then stories would come up and they were so interesting. And there was no way for me as an archivist to document them immediately and concretely. And I don't think that was the end goal for them. They didn't want me necessarily to be like, can you please slow down? I'm going to type everything that is being said here. And the same goes for a lot of the legends or the myths that have part of the rich culture of the community. Is if I document one version of it, tomorrow the new version is not the same, because oral history, the state will say it's not legitimate because it changes over time. So the stories, they are adapted to the needs of the community in that moment. And so if I document it, it's like I'm setting them in stone, and it's not necessarily what they want it to look like. And so I've been faced with that knowledge issue. So what am I going to do? Or is there something to be done? Or is it my question? Should I ask these questions or not? I know that because of that, I've talked a lot with the Grand Council, and they've asked maybe we should not do an archive center, but what we'd call the knowledge center, where, yeah, there'd be content, described, documented content, but maybe what could be also is a place where elders can share stories with younger generations, and not necessarily to be documented or anything, but for the knowledge to be shared and reused. So we're taking a step back from archives, and now because of that, we're also finding funding that is not just LAC or BIMQ. We're finding funding in storytelling, literature, culture. We're trying to find other ways to find funding, because we're not necessarily going to be an archive center. We're going to be more like a knowledge center where people can share. And so I have to accept that this is no longer archive content, or this is no longer an archival issue, but it's something else. So no, there's no like, I'm trying to make it fit in. I can't, and I don't think it should be.
I think that's so wonderful, Dom. And I think, first of all, your flexibility has been incredible, and your learning process has been so amazing to watch. And I think what you're talking about here with, adapting with the needs and the wants of the community is just so wonderful, so enriching, and really embodies what we talked about in taking a more asset-based approach, working with the traditions that they already have, and working to promote that and to make that knowledge and information in that form accessible to the community is so, so wonderful. Now, over the course of your presentation, you mentioned that you had to step off of your highway that you were expecting, which I think is something that a lot of us can definitely relate to, and is a challenge that a lot of us faced. And I'm wondering if you can share maybe one of your biggest challenges, your biggest failure, or your biggest disappointment, and how did you come about it during your fellowship? What came of it? What did you learn from it?
Well, one of our biggest issues, I'm going to go technical on that question because it's a very true issue, real, is we had a hosting problem. So we had all the software that people wanted to give us. We could have funding for initiatives, for projects, etc. But when it came for long-term, like, okay, this hosting is going to cost us $5,000 every year for the next 20 years, nobody wanted to fund it, because it's not necessarily the sexiest thing to fund. You can't say, well, at the end of the year, send us a report, and so we'll be able to say, hey, look at how we've helped this Indigenous community. No, because there's not going to be a lot of evolving pieces over time. It's the same hosting. And so hosting has been one of the reasons why we are still not able to share to the entire community all the content that's been digitized. So if you want to have access to the content, you still have to come to the museum. And it sounds like not a big deal, but we could not do our naming project, for example, during the winter time because elders did not want to walk to the museum or take their car because it was too snowy outside. So we want them to have access to all the content, being able to add content, comment, etc., from their own home, from the comfort of their own home. And we are not able to do that because we didn't have hosting. And so we kind of made it understand, we kind of told Dartmouth, thank you so much for giving all of this to us, the content, but we're not going to be able to share it because we don't have a hosting software hosting contract. And they made it their issue and they've helped us. Now it's a temporary solution. It's 3 years, but it's something that I plan on bringing to the table with the ACA. Because it's wonderful that we can create all these guides and help communities create their old community centers, but there's no funding, for example, for hosting. And so where do we find and how could we create that funding? So that is probably the one thing that made us change all our tires multiple times, because we had to give the digitized content on USB keys to different people, but they're not up to date because we continue, feeding the database on our computers. So that is one of the, I would say, not a failure, but the biggest challenge that we've faced. And for that reason, fellowship is done in a week, but it will not be done for me because of that issue we're working on.
Thanks, Dominic. So in the chat here, we have Camille. She said she's really impressed and amazed by your journey and all of your accomplishments, and she really appreciated the Dartmouth story. And then we have a question from Emily here. What a fantastic presentation, Dom. Can you tell us a bit about your future role in the work or relationship with the community and what that'll look like, which you touched on a little bit, but you can further dive in.
Yeah, well, I want to say two things. First off, that comment from Camille Dalkir is a professor of mine. I'm very surprised. Hello, Kim. I was surprised that Kim was connected. I want to take a moment to say that all of this would not have happened if it hadn't been for the courage that I had to ask in the middle of a class, could you help me with this? And her saying, yeah, sure, why not, come to my office. And this is the first grant that I had for my project was because of Professor Dalkir, and the ball kept rolling, and she's the one who also helped me ask for the fellowship. And her, yeah, that's not going to be difficult, you can do this attitude made me continued in my fellowship, where I was like, well, yeah, okay, I'll just write something up and tell the truth and probably it's going to work. And it did. So I want to take the moment because a lot of people that I know are on this call, but this is Professor Dalkir that I've probably mentioned a few times. So thank you, Professor Dalkir. And so for Emily, yeah, I will continue meeting. I will continue meeting the new employee every Monday on Zoom. So when you see me in Nova Scotia next week, I will take a little time, an hour. I take an hour every week now to talk with Yanni, just to see what's the next step, what she needs help with. I will continue doing the grant writings, and I continue being part of, I have a grand council of the National Waban-Aki email. And so I'm part of many of the discussions. Something that I forgot to mention, but one of my goals were, and it's related to this, is I got the chance to talk to a McGill University class. I present my project to one of Professor Gord. He invited me to talk about this project to his class, and it initiated a lot of conversation with his students who reached out to me afterwards. Who wants to apply this to some of them are living near First Nations communities. And I've also had the chance to talk about this to UQAM students in one of the classes. And in 3 weeks, I will be traveling to University of Montreal, where I'll be talking about this project also. So it's the whole idea of making students aware of what you're reading in books is great. But when you happen, this is reality, and this is reality if you're working with a marginalized community who perceives archives as a colonialist approach, but still want to be part of this, but like don't know how to deal with the approach. They're very enriching discussions. So I plan on having these discussions more and more with the community also. And I'm friends with them. Got married this weekend, and everybody wrote to me and wanted pictures, and I'm going to go show them some pictures and etc. So I plan on keeping a very friendly relationship with them also.
Thanks, Dom, and congratulations on getting married.
Thank you.
And just a quick follow-up to Emily's question, and also what you were commenting in your presentation I found fascinating was how you are kind of like translating between Anglophone and French speakers when the two different groups meet to discuss decisions. And that must be very challenging. Sometimes, how do you navigate that in terms of, are there arguments or disagreements and things like that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a slower process. Even just with the Dartmouth College, they speak English only and the community only speaks French. So I've been present to every single meeting that they've had. And I have the opportunity, they are all archivists at Dartmouth. So I also have to use, non-archivist language for them to understand, because we have our own little world here, and it's normal if you don't understand when we talk. And so I've had to do both. It puts a lot of pressure on you because maybe you mistranslated or they're misunderstanding. For example, I had not understood at first that they were ready to repatriate all the content. And when we hung up, members of the community were like, that's awesome. And I was like, oh, wait, that's not what they said. They just said, yeah, we'll send you pictures. That's not what they said. And then I realized maybe I mistranslated, and I led them to believe something that wasn't true. And so I had to go reach back to them and had that difficult conversation and then say, yeah, no, that's not what we said, but it's a good point. Maybe we should repatriate. So there are moments where even if I mistranslated, it brought on to good conversation. And now we're in the process of repatriating content. And I just want to give an example of one of the beautiful things that we will be able to repatriate is Professor Gordon Day, his name was. When he came to the community, he did a video shoot of with a no camera of a woman weaving basket. He has an audio of that woman talking, and then he took pictures. And at the end of that event, she gave the basket to him as a gift. And now we'll repatriate the entire collection of that. And so we'll be able to recreate that event in the museum. So you'll be able to hear her, see it, see pictures, and see the basket in front of you in the museum.
That's fantastic, Dom. I have an appreciation for you here in the chat. Lauren says that she's so proud of what you and your community have accomplished. And I think we can all echo that. It's been a really incredible year for you. I will remind everyone, we do have a couple of minutes left if people want to pop questions in the chat or on the Facebook live stream. But I do have another question for you, just based on your presentation, your questions so far. I'm wondering, what do you envision as the potential for reshaping academic study of Indigenous communities through this type of work? You mentioned that you yourself were inspired by reading about how harmful the traditional practices were in academia. And so do you think this type of work is scalable to other academic institutions? Is there a movement towards that? How do you think that would look?
I think it's a great question. I know that there are a few universities who are taking this situation very seriously. I know in Saskatchewan, there's a university within information science specifically treating Indigenous issues, who are led by Indigenous professors. Obviously, these people are much more equipped and knowledgeable on both ends than I am. I have more hands-on approach than most archivists, but one of the things that I hope to see and is when I went to CUNA College, in which I was mentioning is a First Nations Indigenous college, community college in Odanak. They give a class that's Introduction to Archaeologists and Introduction to Anthropology. And it's a wonderful class given by anthropologists and archaeologists. Students are incredibly interested and very engaged in this class until they learn that if they want to be an anthropologist and archaeologist, it's going to take at least 6 years of university. Because most of CUNA students are parents who are returning to school later on in life. And so they have a lot of responsibilities, and they all plan on going back to their community after their degree is done. I say this because I live in the res with them. So I've come to know these students, and they have children, and they're like, yeah, we're doing this because it's good for our family, but we're going back to our community, wherever that might be. And so I had the opportunity to talk about archival studies in one of their classes. And when they realized that you could be a technician archivist with a 1-year program that you could do online and during evenings, a lot of people said, I want to be an archivist. And it was because it touches the whole historical and cultural part that anthropology and archaeology offers, but it's easier and more accessible, and you can study it in your community. And after that discussion, I was in the talks with some of the CUNA directors saying maybe we should offer a program in archival studies there. And I think that would be the best of both worlds, where we could teach, but we would also learn from reality from these students, rather than us trying like we're doing with the ACA, which is not a problem, but we're trying to guess or propose issues rather than having a full time to listen to them. And I think CUNA would be like a really nice incubating place where we could create new archivists could be created and go help their communities according to the community that they know, because members of the community know their communities more than any archivist that goes in there.
Well, Dom, we are coming close to the end of our hour, so I just want to thank you so much for sharing such an insightful look into your year. I hope that everyone watching have enjoyed hearing about the progression through Dominique's fellowship. And thank you to everyone who joined us and everyone who will be watching this recording later. Please do consider tuning in for the remainder of the presentations this week. And if you would like to rewatch Dom's presentation or watch any of the other past presentations, you can find them on the Pathy Foundation Fellowship Facebook page. If you would like to connect with Dominique and talk more about her initiative after this presentation, you can reach out to her via LinkedIn, and I will share her profile in the chat.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and great presentation, Dominique.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful time listening to you speak, and we have another presentation this afternoon. If anyone would like to join from 3 to 4 p.m., Emily Booker will be presenting, and I believe there's 3 presentations tomorrow and another couple on Friday. So please tune in. Thanks.
Perfect. And a special shout out to my brother and my parents who connected today. It made it special for me.